Hello, young voters. I'm Sarah, and this is Nico, and welcome back to Reform or Revolution, Chapter 7. If you have not seen other parts, you might want to watch them. Maybe don't watch them. I don't know. They're pretty fun, and if you haven't read this chapter, I would advise you to read it because, for all we know, we read this completely incorrectly, and nothing that we say is right. So, sorry about that. But let's get started anyways.
Thank you, Sarah, for that intro. That was fantastic. Okay, so Sarah, just just wave your hand when you want to jump in. So so my first note is for literally the second sentence of the book. I mean the chapter, which is funny. But at this point, she sort of makes a uncharitable criticism, I felt like, of Bernstein, where she says Bernstein doesn't lay out his vision for his type of socialism properly in an article that he wrote in some journal. And then she follows it up by saying, but he does write the book, he does lay it out properly in his book. And I feel like this is like, she's just being uncharitable because she's trying to suggest that he inadequately addresses the thing in the article, but you shouldn't really expect him to address everything super properly in a short article. A book is much better format for that. And then she immediately follows it up, but I feel like what you take away really is that Bernstein's ideas are inadequate, and that's just what your brain remembers. And I feel like that's sort of dishonest, and I don't like when people use rhetorical strategy to win. They should be able to win off the merits of their ideas. And especially in theory, I don't know. I don't appreciate that. Sarah, what do you think?
No, I agree. It was just the last two chapters where she was consistently just bringing up the tiniest little details that were bad about Bernstein's writing. And it was I don't care if he's a bad writer. I just care if your point is better than his point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like she's become so enveloped in trying to epically own Bernstein, that she just, I don't know, she kind of loses sight. And I feel like this is dishonest, and yeah, this is a poor reflection of your character, Miss Rosa.
God.
All right. My next note, and then Sarah, if you have anything before this, just jump in. If this is after your next note. So then she, gets into the meat of her argument, and basically she lays out that worker cooperatives are run on capitalist principles and cannot continue to exist because capitalism cannot continue to exist. That's what she's saying here in this situation. Basically, any work of cooperatives, basically any cooperative that decided to become more capitalist would have a greater advantage in a capitalist market and would dominate the market. And in the end, they would become a corporation with a monopoly, and it would just basically become capitalism all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't really believe in worker cooperatives, which, I guess is a criticism, but I feel like it sort of ignores the idea that, central to worker cooperatives is that most cooperatives are going to put the rights of their workers first, because the workers get the vote. Why would they vote themselves out of less wages and stuff? So while technically possible, I feel like it would be unlikely. And if every single business was a worker cooperative, even the most hard capitalist thing would have a hard time succeeding, and nobody would work for them. And I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of she just throws this out there. I feel like as a rhetorical strategy, she says this and then doesn't really engage with any of the criticisms of her would-be argument, or doesn't prepare for any of them. So I felt like this point was poorly made.
Well, she also says they'll either become a part of capitalist enterprise or they will dissolve. So it's very black and white with what happens. I don't know enough really about cooperatives to really speak on it, but there's got to be a middle ground where it actually works out in favor of the people in it who are yeah. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think she was saying that in the context of if it became more capitalized, then like, you know, if you know, the same reasons why capitalist businesses are ever more ruthless, if you you know, you don't succeed if you're more ruthless, so I guess you'll dissolve. But I don't know. And she also like just says like this will be in a capitalist economy, but like who's to say if there's all worker cooperatives, like who's to say that won't change the economy dramatically? Who's to say it'll be different than capitalism? Maybe it won't be socialism, but it'll be some sort of something different. Market socialism, I guess, probably you called that. So I don't know. I feel like this was a poor point that on the surface sort of makes like sense, but when you actually think about it, it doesn't. And this is like a lot of what I've seen in conservative rhetoric. So I don't know. I feel like she's being disingenuous or not really putting in a lot of effort to her points. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm really going hard on Rosa today, but
it's deserving.
We have to criticize the people who write theory so that we better understand it and understand like the good parts of it and not just treat it as gospel, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My next point is in my next point is you know, in this section and the previous section referring to where she talks about worker cooperatives and unions, it deals with the idea that labor unions aren't an attack against capital, but merely a defense against it. And I feel like, again, it's not like a broken record, but I feel like this is just clever rhetoric. And it seems to be that she's not really offering up any actual positions. And she's just saying Bernstein is wrong because he's wrong. And like the context of this is like in the passage, she's saying, you know, trade unions aren't actually an attack on capitalism. They're just a defense. And like, I kind of get what she's meaning by that, but those are like, you know, I don't know. I feel like those are just words like that, you know, she's saying, oh, it's a defense versus an attack when Bernstein says it's an attack versus nothing. I don't know.
Yeah, she's just refuting anything that Bernstein says, like without even considering if it's correct or not.
Yeah, I think she's not properly engaging with the points, and she's just like using rhetoric and connotations of saying, oh, this is actually an attack or this is actually a defense when, you know, without actually providing any substantive commentary. I don't know. Really just gotten hard on Reddit today, I guess.
At one point, she also she brings up, well, like Sisyphus, which is, if anyone watching doesn't know, it's this Greek story about a guy who's like condemned to the underworld, and Hades makes him push a rock up a hill, and it always falls. So he's just in this loop of getting to the top, only for him to have to restart. And she kind of like makes that an analogy for trade unions. And I kind of think she just put that in there to sound more like smart and being like, hey, this is something that you know about. Like, I'm being relatable. You know this story. This is how trade unions work. I don't know if it's really like even correct in this situation. And she did a similar thing next when she brings up Don Quixote. I don't know if I said that correctly, but yeah. And she just kind of is like naming people so that whoever reading kind of feels as though they're relating more to Rosa and her points. At least that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, you know, I'd be inclined to agree. I think the problem here isn't that she's using persuasive language, is that she's only using persuasive language and not a whole lot of reasoning or economic principles or any like concrete explanations. Maybe, you know, at the time, you know, they were like constantly getting flooded with these concrete explanations and stuff like that. So like, you know, somebody would read Reform and Revolution just as like, not propaganda, but I don't really know another word for it, and then like learn the ideas. But I feel like to convince people, you should present the ideas and then add in like some persuasive language, but not just make it purely persuasive language, because that goes towards political trends that I don't like, and I don't think Sarah likes either.
No.
All right. My next point was so the section and I think this was the labor union section, can be concluded in the idea that Rosa believes that labor unions and worker cooperatives are not tools for socialization, but merely tools for the limitations of profit, as Bernstein himself admits, and therefore it is illogical for Bernstein to think it is socialization. And this seems again like tricky rhetoric, but it, like, she's just saying like this is illogical because it is. And it does seem illogical, but we don't really hear Bernstein's perspective, so it only seems illogical in the context of what Rosa is saying. So but she does develop more on it later, so I won't criticize this part as much. I jumped ahead a significant amount, so Sarah, if you had anything before that section that you want to share.
Nope.
All right, so I think she's following up here. She's saying that Bernstein. So in this portion, she's saying that Bernstein says that it makes no sense that he cannot hope to logically introduce socialism through the gradual influence of things like worker co-ops and trade unions, and is the antithesis of logic of. And she quotes a social democrat to back her up here to say, like, even social democrats have more reason than Bernstein does. Rosa argues through the use of the quotation that social democrats critique Bernstein. The social democrat believes that they can suppress the capitalist mode of production through government reforms. She believes in overthrowing capitalist mode of production, obviously, and Bernstein believes that he can. Sorry, I lost track. Bernstein believes that he can magically push the capitalist mode of production into a socialist mode of production using trade unions and worker co-ops and then she puts reasoning into this in earlier chapters. So go watch her earlier videos for that reasoning. And then I think I agree with this point. Although I'm agreeing more with the quote of the social democrat in this situation, but Bernstein seems to be like a fence sitter here, and not really logical. Although again, this is Rosa's book, and from her perspective, and she might not be being charitable to Bernstein's argument. So we have to keep that in mind. All right, I think this is my last note. So Sarah, if you have anything else to say.
Your last note?
I didn't have a lot of notes, so.
Okay. It's a lot of pressure, but it's fine. You can do your note first.
Huh? No, this is like literally the last passage of the.
Okay. Well then, I didn't get any notes for like that last part, but like, okay, the last thing that I wrote down was basically Rosa argues that democracy is shown like more effectively in like history, in communes and in social democratic states and everything like that, while in capitalist states monarchies have worked the best, which I just thought was like a very interesting point of view. And especially because like obviously today we live in a democratic state and a capitalist state, so if it works better in a monarchy, wouldn't that mean that like governments would, kind of slightly work more in a monarchy type manner in order to make capitalism work better? And I also think this was kind of rhetoric in a way where she was just being like, hey, clearly democracy works better in communes, so why don't you come and join a commune? Like just using a buzzword like democracy to make people read it and associate it with communism. So.
That's an interesting point. I think my reflection on this would be that I'm not sure I particularly agree. I think capitalism doesn't work as good under monarchy because capitalism under monarchy was normally feudalism and what's the thing? Merchant capitalism, or what was it called? Mercantilism. Yeah, there you go. Called mercantilism. So I am not so sure that it works better under that because it's corruptible and less efficient. But the idea that capitalism works better under like authority, I think I would agree with Because like businesses, if you think about it, are not democratic at all. You have one person making all the decisions. You know, if you're just a random worker, you don't really get a say. So that is like the most autocratic thing you could really think of, and that's the way businesses are organized. So yeah, I'd probably say I agree that capitalism works best under authoritarianism, but not necessarily monarchy.
I get you. I agree.
Maybe those were synonymous at the time.
Yeah, maybe.
Because we didn't really have any other examples.
She gave examples. I don't remember what they were.
Well, no, I mean, like at the time they didn't have fascism or, you know, the attempts at socialism that turned bad.
Almost fascism. Almost socialism that turned bad. But she gave examples, and at times she did talk about like not necessarily monarchies, but like stuff similar to monarchies.
The simple times, the good old days.
The good old days, right?
When America was great.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Do you have any more notes or?
No, that's my last one.
That's all your notes.
That's it.
All right, people, comment down below if you want to hear more notes from Sarah. Peer pressure works, guys. Make her write, take more notes. Okay.
A lot of notes. So.
Huh?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. So my final note, which kind of segues into what we were talking about, is in this section, and you're gonna have to read this. I'm sorry, this is just too long to explain, and I didn't really fully understand it. But in the last part, she basically, I feel like, predicts fascism, or the rise in fascism or right wing reactionary movements as a development of a society that is capitalistic. And she sort of like predicts World War One, which was, you know, not as novel. A lot of people sort of were able to see that coming. Although obviously not to the scale that it ended up being. But I wonder if this is entirely like separate of the idea that many Marxists would have that say that fascism is simply a stage of capitalism that happens when its interests are threatened by the labor movement, which is almost verbatim what she says. Or did they get the idea from her? Or like was it independent? Which if it was independent, then she obviously predicted this. She predicted that this idea would come out, which is crazy, which is interesting. And maybe does that even suggest that she might be right? Because if she was able to predict this stuff based off of her judgments, was she right? Maybe not. I would say probably not about everything. That might just be like she understood some things and she was right about that. So,
yeah. Because like people in history have been right about something. Like Sigmund Freud is a nutcase, but he was right about like two things. Like just because someone gets one thing right doesn't mean necessarily everything's correct.
Well, I mean, she's predicted a lot of stuff in this book. I think I comment usually when I see it, but I feel like she's predicted a lot in this book. I mean, maybe she's able to. I think her critiques of capitalism are fairly on the nose. I think anything beyond that I don't agree with, which is what the book is about. So it doesn't seem to be working. But her critiques of capitalism are on the nose, and I feel like that is where she makes her predictions from. So yeah, but it also might be that, you know, people just read this work and then adopted this idea from that.
Maybe.
Because that's how theory works. But yeah, so she was able to sort of predict growing militarism, right-wing reactionary, possibly even fascism to suppress the labor movement, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Sarah, do you have anything else?
No.
Okay. I just remembered a idea that I had while I was reading. I'm not sure exactly where it was. I think it was toward the start of the chapter. But the idea, I think it was something about a quote. Maybe it was here or at the start of this chapter. Sarah, tell me if you remember where it was. But she was talking a lot about if we pass all these reforms, then capitalism will be like if the it was when she was talking about the productionary mode of capitalism, I think, and she was saying if you eliminate the productionary mode of capitalism, then revolution will be harder as there will be nothing to revolt against and justice will not be felt. So again, here, I mentioned this last time, but it feels like she's advocating for accelerationism and I'm not too sure if I can get behind that as well. So that kind of irked me a little bit, but also interesting because it does make sense.
Yeah, that was like one of the big points in the last chapter. I remember that, which, I mean, like, I agree with everything you said. It makes sense, but I don't like that it made sense.
Mm-hmm. I think hopefully we haven't gone too long, so I have the time to talk about this. But I think accelerationism is really it's generally problematic unless you really have a rallying cause behind it, unless you have like a strong base and a like a strong charisma, a leader that you can rally behind. Like say if we had accelerationism going, but there was also like a far left wing party, like a socialist party, maybe even in the U.S. that had a pretty strong base, like a third of the country, and the rhetoric was able to be spread throughout without the Red Scare still being a thing, and there were like stronger leaders in Congress, and a lot of social democrats in Congress, and some socialists in Congress. Maybe at that point accelerationism might work, but right now accelerationism only works to the hands of the fascists. Which obviously we don't want to give them power, so
that would not be good.
we found that out
a few times.
Yes, although the leftists predicted that it would be bad even before it happened, so had they only been listened to.
God, disappointing.
All right, well, this was only one chapter, so we wanted to make it shorter. The next video on the next chapter is going to be coming out, and I think we're going to be doing one chapter by one chapter until we reach the end of the book, which is only in 3 chapters. So only 3 more videos left, but yeah. All right, well, thank you for watching, everybody. Make sure to check out our Discord, like the video, subscribe to us, check out our website, check out Sarah's page, check out my page, check out the playlist for the series, check out the link for the PDF of the book, and that's it.
Do all the things. I love
Do
you.
all the things.
Bye, guys.
All right, goodbye.